You've known it for years, maybe most of your life, that strange undercurrent you could never quite name. The feeling that while others seem perfectly content to skate along the surface of things, you were somehow born with a deep-sea diver's lungs, pulled toward what lies beneath. It wasn't something you asked for, and certainly not something anyone explained to you. You didn't wake up one day and decide, I want to see through people's masks. It just happened. No, it was always there, like a lens built into you from birth. You remember those moments when you were young, sitting in a room full of relatives or neighbors, everyone smiling and chatting, and you could feel something tight under all that cheer, a tension no one acknowledged. It was in the way a cousin's laugh was half a second too loud, or how your uncle's eyes shifted away when certain topics came up. You didn't have the words for it then, but you knew something wasn't lining up. The words people used, the way their bodies moved, the temperature in the air, it all told you more than they intended. At school you saw it too, the way teachers praised kids who followed the rules without ever asking why the rules were there in the first place. The way classmates pretended to be interested in whatever fad was popular just to avoid standing out. You weren't trying to rebel. You just couldn't swallow something that didn't taste right. And every time you spoke up, every time you pointed out the obvious gap between what was being said and what was actually happening, the room seemed to stiffen. You could see it in their faces. They didn't like that you noticed. They didn't like that you could see. They'd tell you you were reading too much into things, or that you were too sensitive, too intense, too something that never sounded like a compliment. But deep down you understood it wasn't that you were too much, it was that you were unwilling to pretend. Thoth, if he were sitting across from you right now, would tell you this is no accident. He'd tell you there's a name for this way of seeing. Sacred sight. Not magic, not some airy spiritual trick, but perception that hasn't been dulled by the constant noise of a world built on performance. It's the ability to notice the tremor behind someone's smile, to hear the fracture in a voice when the words still sound steady, to feel the energy of a room shift before anyone says a thing. It's not a skill you trained for. It's the original setting of your consciousness. The trouble is, the world doesn't reward this kind of vision. In fact, it treats it like a threat. People have built their entire identities on stories they've never questioned, and someone who walks in with eyes that see past those stories, that's dangerous. You learned early on to feel that quiet discomfort ripple through the air when you entered a space. The way conversations would change, eyes would glance away, a sudden urge to wrap things up and leave. You probably thought it was you, your personality, your way of speaking, but what it really was your presence pulling on threads they didn't want unraveled. That's the thing about sacred sight. It doesn't just reveal the truth to you. It forces others to feel the truth they've been avoiding. And they don't thank you for it. They blame you for disturbing the peace, even if that peace was nothing but a fragile illusion. I know you've carried this like a weight, questioning whether it's worth it, wondering if maybe you'd be better off dimming the light just to fit in. You've probably tried. You've laughed at jokes that weren't funny, agreed with statements that felt wrong in your bones. Let conversations drift on while you swallowed the truth you could see so clearly. You did it to keep the peace, to avoid the sighs and the sidelong glances. But that pretending, my friend, that pretending has been what's draining you. Not the seeing itself, not the perception. The exhaustion comes from holding back the truth, from constantly translating yourself into something softer, smaller, less disruptive. And maybe at some point you convinced yourself that was the noble thing to do, that sparing people's comfort was better than confronting them with what you knew. But the longer you do it, the more you betray your own nature. And nature doesn't take betrayal lightly. There's a reason you've felt that tightness in your chest in certain rooms, or that restlessness that follows you even when you're relaxing. It's the cost of forcing your soul to pretend it can't see what's right in front of it. Thoth calls it the first exile, the moment you start leaving yourself just to remain in the company of others. But here's the truth he never lets you forget. The sight you carry is not a curse. It's not there to isolate you for the sake of punishment. It's a responsibility, yes, and a heavy one. But it's also the very thing that connects you to what's real in a world that's forgotten how to recognize reality. And as much as it can make you feel like an outsider, it also means you'll never be completely lost in the fog. You'll always have that inner compass, that tuning fork that rings when something is out of alignment. You've been told to tone it down, to stop looking so closely, to stop asking the kinds of questions that make people squirm. But that's like telling a bird to stop flying because it makes the ground creatures nervous. You can't unsee what you see. You can't go back to pretending the mask is the face. And maybe, just maybe, you weren't meant to, because somewhere out there are others who've been walking with that same sense of dissonance, that same gnawing awareness that the script everyone else is following is paper thin. And they've been waiting, not for someone perfect, not for someone who has all the answers, but for someone who refuses to stop looking. Someone who will stand in the truth even when it costs them the easy kind of belonging. That's you. And whether you've admitted it to yourself or not, you've been living for that moment when you can drop the act entirely and breathe in a room where nothing needs to be hidden. You may not have found that room yet, but it's coming. And when it does, you'll realize all the years you spent feeling out of place were not wasted. They were proof that you were never meant to settle for a place that wasn't real. You've carried something for so long you've stopped noticing how heavy it is. It's not a weight you can set down on a table or measure on a scale. It's the quiet strain in your bones. The way even a day without much doing can still leave you feeling drained, like you've been running some invisible race. You might have chalked it up to age or stress, or the thousand small responsibilities that seem to multiply over the years. But deep down, you know it's not that simple. It's not just the life you're living. It's the way you're living it. It's what Thoth calls the sacred wound. Not a wound from a single event, not a scar that's healed over, but an ongoing mark left by seeing and feeling what most people can't or won't acknowledge. It's the consequence of walking into a room and picking up on the emotions no one's talking about. That faint tension in the air before anyone speaks. The grief hiding under someone's polite smile. The anger masked by charm. You feel it before they do. And it doesn't just brush past you. It sticks, as if your nervous system is tuned like a radio to frequencies that can't be turned off. You didn't choose this station. You were born with it. The trouble is, no one teaches you how to manage it. So over the years, you've carried other people's storms as if they were your own. That low-grade anxiety you sometimes wake up with? That heaviness that follows you home from certain gatherings? Half the time, it's not even yours. It's emotional debris, absorbed without permission, but stored all the same. And here's the part no one tells you. The body keeps score. The more you carry that doesn't belong to you, the more it shows up as fatigue, as tension in your chest, as that dull ache you can't explain to a doctor because there's no lab test for what's wrong. So you start avoiding certain spaces. You limit how long you stay at events. You learn to politely step out of conversations that feel like they're draining the air from your lungs. People might think you're antisocial, but you're not. You're conserving yourself. You're protecting the last reserves of energy you have for what actually matters to you. And still, there are times you find yourself surrounded by chatter, laughter, small talk, and you feel the life bleeding out of you. It's not that you dislike people. You just can't bear to keep playing a part in a script that makes you feel like you're drowning. So you've mastered the art of splitting yourself. There's the version of you that goes to family gatherings, the one who laughs when expected, asks safe questions, nods at familiar answers. There's the work version, measured, agreeable, never too pointed. There's the social version, easygoing, careful not to press too hard on anything real. And then there's the quiet version, the one you keep mostly to yourself, the one who still feels the truth under it all. You might not realize it, but every time you switch between these versions, you leave a little piece of yourself behind. It's a slow erosion, not dramatic enough for anyone else to notice, but deep enough that you feel the gap growing inside you. And the longer you live like that, the harder it gets to remember which version is the original. Thoth calls this living between worlds. One foot in the realm of appearances, where everything is smooth and rehearsed. The other in the realm of depth, where nothing can be faked without you knowing. It's not just a spiritual split, it's a psychological exile. You don't belong fully to either place. In one world, you're too much. In the other, you're not enough. And so you learn to live in the space between, translating yourself so you can pass unnoticed, even if it means betraying what you feel. Maybe the first time you spoke your truth too clearly, someone flinched. Maybe they changed the subject. Maybe they avoided you for a while. Or maybe they told you to tone it down. You learned from that moment. You learned that being fully yourself can scare people. And somewhere along the way, you started to believe that if you wanted to keep people around, you'd have to keep parts of yourself hidden. But here's what no one tells you about that bargain. You can only split yourself for so long before the pieces start slipping through your fingers. Your body feels it first. That strange, bone-deep tiredness that sleep doesn't fix. The heaviness in your chest when you're in the wrong room too long. The tightness in your jaw from all the words you swallow. And while you tell yourself it's just stress, a part of you knows it's the weight of pretending. You've been rehearsing your personality for so long, you've forgotten what it's like to just speak without decoding yourself first. And maybe you want to believe you can keep it up, that you can keep the peace without losing yourself. But that's the cruel trick of the sacred wound. It doesn't close when ignored. It deepens, keeps calling you back to yourself, back to the truth you've been trying to make quieter. Thoth would tell you that this wound isn't here to break you. It's here to soften you without weakening you, to keep you awake when it would be easier to go numb. It's proof you've survived without losing your depth. And while that makes you rare, it also makes you lonely. Because most people don't want to feel, let alone feel everything. They want distraction, certainty, comfort. You crave presence, meaning, and something real enough to hold on to. That craving has cost you. You've lost friendships that couldn't withstand your honesty. You've watched relationships collapse when you stopped pretending. You've felt guilt for not being easier. But what you may not have fully realized yet is that every time you refused to shrink, you made space for someone else to be more honest. Every time you didn't play along, you sent out a signal to those who are also living between worlds. You're not the only one. And when those people find you, when someone can stand in your presence without flinching, when they don't look away from what they see in you, that's when you remember you were never too much. You were simply surrounded by too little. The sacred wound will keep doing its work whether you like it or not. It will keep carving you open until more light gets in. And I know it's tempting to see that as a flaw, to wish you could just get over it and live like everyone else. But the wound is not who you are, it's how you found the truth. It's the reason you can tell when someone's smile doesn't match their eyes. It's why you can hear the fear under someone's confidence. It's what keeps you from buying into a world that wants you to forget yourself. And as much as it aches, it's also the source of your clarity. The challenge now isn't to get rid of it. It's to live with it fully, to let it shape you without letting it harden you, to use it as a compass instead of a cage. Because the moment you start honoring it instead of hiding it, the fatigue begins to turn into discernment, the sensitivity into wisdom, and the loneliness into something else entirely, clarity. You weren't meant to carry the whole world's pain. But you were meant to recognize it, to see it clearly, and to choose what to do with it. And that choice, my friend, is where your power lies. There comes a point where simply seeing is no longer enough, where the ability to read a room or sense the truth behind a person's words begins to feel less like a gift and more like a weight pressing on your chest. You've spent years, maybe decades, noticing what others miss, translating yourself into smaller pieces so you don't make people uncomfortable, carrying the emotions of strangers as if they were your own. But the longer you do it, the clearer the question becomes, what am I meant to do with all of this? Because perception without action starts to rot inside you. It turns into restlessness, into the kind of heaviness that no amount of sleep or distraction can lift. Thoth says this is the moment where the gift stops being passive and starts demanding something from you. You weren't entrusted with sight just to sit quietly in the corner and observe. You were given it to act as a kind of living alchemy, not to force the world to change, but to become a steady fire that burns through illusion simply by existing. The trouble is, the system you've lived in your whole life never wanted you to realize that. It's been training you since you were young to think you're too fragile, too unqualified, too small to hold that kind of power. It would rather you numb yourself with television, errands, obligations, endless scrolling. Anything but the truth. Because the moment you understand that your perception can alter the space you walk into, the illusion begins to unravel. Think back to the times you've spoken a truth everyone else was avoiding. Maybe your words were met with silence, or someone made a joke to change the subject, or they rolled their eyes. But even if they didn't admit it, something shifted. You've seen it happen. A look in someone's eyes. A pause that wasn't there before. That's not coincidence, that's energy moving. That's the start of transmutation. But here's where the responsibility comes in. You can't just throw truth like a grenade and walk away. Real alchemy requires discipline. It requires you to know the difference between what is yours to carry and what belongs to someone else. It asks you to protect your own energy so you don't get pulled under by the very pain you're trying to transform. No one teaches you how to do that. Not in school, not in church, not in the workplace. You have to learn it yourself. You have to start by guarding what you allow in. The conversations you linger in, the media you consume, the people you give your time to. Every choice is a filter, and you are the gatekeeper. That's not selfishness. That's maintenance. You don't need to fix the whole world. You just need to keep your corner of it clear enough that the truth can breathe there. And when you do that, people notice. Not because you're preaching at them, but because your presence feels different. They may not be able to name it, but they feel it, the way you don't flinch in the face of discomfort, the way you listen without needing to dominate, the way you carry a kind of quiet steadiness that refuses to be bought or rattled. That's what draws the right ones to you. And that's the other part of this chapter, learning to recognize your people. Because when you've spent so much of your life surrounded by those who shrink from the mirror you hold, it can be almost disorienting to meet someone who doesn't. When their eyes don't dart away, when they match your gaze instead of avoiding it, when you feel seen without having to explain yourself, that's when you remember you weren't meant to walk this path alone. These connections don't happen every day. In fact, they're rare by design. Thoth says those who carry sight are scattered intentionally, like seeds planted in different fields. So when two of them meet, the spark is strong enough to light a fire. And when it happens, you'll know. You'll feel a sense of relief you didn't realize you'd been holding out for. No performance, no translation, just two people speaking in the same frequency. The world will try to convince you these moments don't matter, that they're just coincidences, that you should focus on more practical things. Ignore that. These meetings are fuel. They remind you why you keep showing up as yourself in a culture that rewards masks. They restore your faith that you're not imagining it, that there are others who see what you see and feel what you feel. But here's the hard truth. Not all of them will stay. Sometimes they appear just long enough to hand you a key, to unlock a door in your own mind, and then life pulls you in different directions. You can't cling to them out of fear of going back to being misunderstood. You have to let them go when it's time, trusting that the connection has done its work. What remains is the imprint, that deep knowing that you are not, and never were, alone in this. And with that knowing comes a kind of freedom. You stop measuring your worth by how many people understand you. You stop needing to be everywhere or liked by everyone. You focus instead on staying lit like a lighthouse. The ships meant to find you will. You don't have to chase them. You don't have to wave your arms. You just have to keep your light steady. That's what scares the system the most. That you might stop seeking its approval, that you might stop performing for it. The moment you do, you slip beyond its reach. You begin to operate from a place it can't touch. And that's where your real influence begins. Not in grand speeches or public applause, but in the quiet moments where your presence gives someone else permission to take off their mask. Not everyone will thank you for it. In fact, some will resent you for showing them what they've been avoiding. But that's not your burden to carry. Your work is to live so fully in your own truth that you become impossible to ignore, not because you're loud, but because you're undeniable. The sacred wound you carry becomes the well you draw from. The sight that once made you feel isolated becomes the reason others can finally see themselves. And slowly, almost without realizing it, you begin to notice the shift. Not just in you, but in the world around you. People who once kept their distance lean in a little closer. Conversations that used to skim the surface start to dip into deeper waters. The atmosphere changes because you are in it. That's the alchemy. That's the point. And as the years go on, the role gets clearer. You're not here to save everyone. You're here to hold the mirror steady while the old illusions crack. You're here to keep your frequency intact while the noise of the world tries to pull it apart. You're here to remember, again and again, that this gift isn't here to make you comfortable. It's here to make you real. And realness, in a culture addicted to the fake, is its own kind of revolution. So you keep going. You trust what you see, even when it isolates you. You stay close to the ones who make you feel seen, not just admired. You refuse to measure your life with someone else's ruler. You let the discomfort be a compass. And one day you'll look back and realize that the thing you once thought was breaking you, the sight, the wound, the loneliness, was actually the thing that was making you whole.